Hi and welcome to techsith tutorial. Today we are going to understand objects in JavaScript. So first step in understanding object-oriented JavaScript is how to create objects in JavaScript. And then we're going to proceed to adding and removing properties to those objects that we just created. Then we can add some methods to it. And uh, it's not going to be complete without adding some private variable and methods. Uh, Remember, this is very important, to achieve encapsulation in JavaScript. And last but not least, creating closures. Um, this is some of the exciting programming that you can do with closures. And but before that, you have to understand how the objects works in JavaScript. So let's start first creating the objects in JavaScript. I would categorize JavaScript objects in two categories: non-function objects and function objects. Yes, functions are also objects in JavaScript. Now let's do some programming. First of all, um, if you're not familiar with this website, this is a wonderful website called Jsfiddle.net. It's called Code Playground, which means you don't need any server to actually try out JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Here on this first block, you can write your HTML code. Your CSS would go here, and then you can write your JavaScript here, and then you would see the result directly here. So now without any delay, let's start writing our first line of code. So I'm going to create an empty object. It's very easy. All you have to do is say var x equal to new object. This actually creates a new object in JavaScript. Now, how do I really know that it created this new object? There is a wonderful debugging tool that's provided by Chrome. Firefox also provide similar tool. But I prefer Chrome because they're constantly upgrading. So in order to get there, if you right click on your browser, Chrome browser, and select element, you would get into this panel would open up at the bottom. It would open up on the side here, on the right side here. But either case, you would see this. There are a bunch of tabs here. But the most important thing, the tab right now that you should be concerned with is console tab. If you click here, you can actually see this console area. Now, in order to find out if the object was created or not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a line called console.log, and I'm going to pass x to it. What it really means is I want to see this object and how in memory, how is it created. So if I just run here, so this place here, right here on the top, when I run, it actually executes this code. And as you can see, it's showing the empty object called object and then open and close curly bracket. This is an empty object. You can also create an empty object by simply saying var y equal to open and close curly bracket. This also create an empty object. It's exactly the same thing as the first line. So let's see if it creates what we expecting it to be. So I'm going to pass y here. I'm going to there's a button here called tidy up. When I click here, it tidy up your code. It doesn't actually do vertical tidiness, but it does the horizontal tidiness. Now, when I run it again, I would see also you can actually, this button you see here, which clears up the log. So if I'm running again, I might want to clean it up before I run it so that the previous run doesn't get mixed up with the new run. So if I click here again, I can see the two objects, and they're exactly the same. There's also another command called dir, when I do this, it gives you a little bit more detail inside the object. And when I click here, as you can see, it's giving me this proto. We'll go into it later on. I just want to know that this is available to you so you can look at the object in much more detail. Now that we know how to create an empty object, I would suggest a second method is much efficient and clean. But you can, as I said, you can also use the first method. Now that we know how to create an empty object, we will create an object with some properties and methods. So let's create something meaningful. Pizza equal to, this is initially we'll create an empty object, and then here inside we can add some properties. So the first property we'll add is crust. We can use colon to separate the property and property value. So the property value here would be thin, let's say. And we can use comma to add another property called toppings. And the toppings would be 3. And that's a number. So the crust is a string, toppings is a number, and then we'll add another property called has bacon. Now this property would be true, means yes, it has bacon. This is a boolean. We'll add another method called how many toppings. Okay, it will return the number of toppings. So for that, instead of adding a property value, we'll just add a function. Now in between here, we will simply say return this dot toppings. Now pay attention, this keyword actually allows you to access any properties and method within this object, any public properties and methods. Crust, toppings, has bacon, they're all public properties. And how many toppings is also a public method. So we can directly access the public properties and method using dot notation, this and dot notation. So here we will return 3. Now this is object that we created. Now let's see how to access the properties. We can simply do it by using dot notation, by saying dot crust. This would give us thin. How do we know? Let's add console log and we'll see. Okay, as you can see, it's returning thin. I can also do has bacon, which will return true. As you can see, it's returning true. So this is how you can write the properties and access the properties. Now, what if I want to add another property after creating your object? You can do this in JavaScript. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another property called price. I can simply add this property by using, again, a dot notation, and I'm going to define the price, $12. It's a string. And I can look at this object again after adding this. This should be added in this object pizza. Let me clear this first and run it. Now as you can see, it's added inside. How do I run the method? Exactly the same way. You can simply say pizza dot how many toppings. In here, I have to use, because it's a function, you have to execute it by this. So I can also console this out. Now this has access to the toppings, so it should return a number of toppings. This is how you comment a line if you don't know. If I run this, this should return 3. So it's running this function, and this function is returning the number of topping, which is 3 here. Now, how do I remove a property? Let's say I like to remove crust from this pizza. I can simply say delete pizza dot crust. And I'm going to activate this line here, which will print out the pizza object, and comment this line out. Now let's run this. Let me first clear this. And when I run this, I should see the object, but this time there is no crust. So it deleted the property. So we can add the property, access it, and delete it. In this case, pizza is actually a singleton. Singleton means you only create it one time, and you don't create other objects from this. And that's why we can easily access directly after creating. We can access directly using a dot notation. But let's say if you want to create objects from other objects, remember JavaScript does not have any formal support for classes, which means instead of creating a class and creating objects from it, we are going to create objects and then creating other objects from it. Using this kind of objects, we cannot do that. So for that, we have to use a functional object. So let's see how to do that. So as I said before, in JavaScript, functions are also objects. So I can simply say pizza equal to function, and this is a function object. I can simply say if I want to look at this object in the console log, I can say pizza. Now it's going to be a little bit different than the other object, non-function object. As you can see, it's showing you simply a function. If I just do dir, it might show you a little bit more. So it added all this other properties like arguments, color, length, name, and then it also has a proto, which we saw in the previous example as well. But it has an additional thing called function, which allows it to execute. So this object has ability to execute, which means you can create other objects from it. Here also we can do we can create public properties by simply using this keyword. So if I can say this dot crust equal to thin, I just create a public property. I can also say this dot toppings equal to 3, and this dot has bacon equal to true. Now let's look at it, how it looks like when I see the object. You can see the object. but you don't see the properties, public properties. That is a huge difference between the previous example and this. You cannot simply access crust here after creating object like this. So if I did this, it would give me an error called undefined. Let me clear this and then run it again. And it gives me an error. In order to access the properties, I have to create an object from this object. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna create a pizza A, variable pizza A equal to new pizza. Now here I'm executing this. Remember, you always have to use keyword new. And now I can access the property crust. Now, when I do this, it will give me thin. I can also create another pizza, pizza B. And I can also get the crust out of it using this. Now, how do I know these are separate, two separate pizza? Well, let's do a test. So I can change the pizza A crust by crust equal to pen. So I've changed the crust of pizza A to pen from thin, but the pizza B still remains thin. Now let's see if that really happened. So as you can see, pizza A has a thin pan crust and pizza B has thin crust. So they are two separate objects. So now we have created two objects from this definition of pizza, which is the master object. So we just created our first constructor using this line, a new pizza. Now let's see how it really works. So we can say pizza B is instance of pizza B instance of pizza. So this should return true, which means pizza B was created from pizza. So if I run this, it returns true. I can also say pizza B dot constructor. And this returns the pizza function, which is this. So it also returns, so we know what is the constructor of pizza B. So we had our first experience of object-oriented programming here. Now let's create private variables and private methods. So, which is exactly the same way. To start with, pizza equal to function. But instead of using this, we'll just use a var crust equal to thin. Here, if I just if I create a new pizza from it, so let's say using a constructor, I can say variable pizza a equal to new pizza, and console.dir pizza a. When I run this, I do not see the crust inside. Means it's a private variable. I do not see it anywhere actually. It's hidden from us here. But if I just say variable has bacon, so instead of making it private, I'm just gonna say this dot has bacon equal to true. And if I run this again, let me just clear it and run it again. So now it's clean. I could see has bacon equal to true, but I do not see crust here. And that means this is hidden to us. I can write a method here, and I can write a public method here, get has bacon equal to function so gonna say return this dot has bacon. So if I do pizza a dot get has bacon, I would get true. Now let's just say log here. Let's see. Log. It's returning true. If I write another method, this dot get crust equal to function, and I don't have to use this because it's a variable. If you know how the scope works, so crust is available to any of the functions inside this object. So I don't have to use this. I can just simply use return crust. So how you're using here this dot bacon, we can just simply use crust because it's a private variable. And I can here I can say console.log pizza a dot get crust. And it's returning. So I can actually access this private variable using a public method. This both a public method, and this one is accessing public property, and this one is accessing public private variable. Now let's do something else here. How about creating a private method? So I can say variable. For that, I'm going to create a third variable called var toppings equal to 3. And I'm going to add another private method. Can do by just simply create another variable. So instead of using this, I'm just going to simply use var get toppings and equal to function. Now remember, this is a private function, which means we cannot use pizza dot get toppings directly. So I'm going to return toppings. As you can see, it's also, because it's a private variable, I can simply return it without using this. Now let's see what happens when you try to execute it. It won't work, so let's see. But console.log pizza a dot get toppings. It says it's not a function because it doesn't know that this function exists. And even if you simply look at this, if I try to print the object, I would see all the other methods. I would get crust and has bacon, which are public methods, but I don't see the get toppings here. So how do I really access this method? Now we have a conundrum. We have a private variable and we have a private method accessing private variable. So there is a way. So first of all, we have to do is we need to remove all these public methods and only keep the private stuff here so we can see things more clearly. Okay, now what we have to do, we have to return this this function somehow. In order to do, we have to create a non-functional object here. So I'm just going to create a variable called temp. It's an empty variable, empty object, and I'm going to create a method called get, exactly the same name here, get toppings equal to get toppings. What it's doing is I created a name of the property get toppings and assign to this private method. I know it's very confusing, but if you try to understand, it's a simple object, empty object. I created a method, a public method for this temp, and assigned this method to it. So now this method became part of this temp. Okay, and I'm going to simply return this tmp. Now pay attention to this because this is very important. So what happens when I do this? When I do a constructor, what is it doing? It's going to return this object temp. So let's see what really happens. So when I do this, it does not have any public stuff, but it has this public method. It doesn't have any public property, but it has a public method called get toppings, which you can see here. Okay, and if you look at inside, you don't see much. Now I can really call this get toppings here and execute this function, get toppings, right? Because I got this temp variable out when I executed this, and so now I can execute this, and I'm getting 3, which means it did return these topics. The confusing part is when you run this constructor, it basically returns this object temp and with one public method, get toppings, right? So this pizza A is essentially nothing but temp object, right? And we can just call its method get toppings, and it would get us the toppings. But how does it, once we get the method out, we haven't returned the value itself, the topping itself, right? Because it was part of this object. How does it remembers the topics? I understand the method, but how does it have access to this toppings after returning this? Because here we are not mentioning anywhere, we're not bringing the toppings with it. This is what is called closure. So in order to see it, I'm just gonna do this. When I console log this, I can, if I expand this object a little bit and expand the get toppings function, here I have a function scope, and if I click on here, it has something called closure. If I expand the closure, it actually binded this variable inside the closure. That's how it has access. When I run this, when I do pizza.get_toppings, it has access. So it's getting it from the closure. So closure is nothing but when I return this object temp with this function get toppings, it knows that it has to grab all the associated variable, in this case is toppings, into the closure. If you notice it did not get the crush, it only got toppings because it's associated with this function. So what it does is when it's returning this thing, this variable temp, it has to not only return the function get toppings, but any variable that is associated with it, which is toppings. So that's how it's doing it. I know it's too much to digest here, but I would suggest that go through this tutorial a couple times, try to understand the fundamentals, and practice. That's how you're gonna learn. You're not gonna probably learn just by looking at this tutorial. So please practice, and subscribe to this channel if you want the future tutorials, and also please feel free to give your comment if you confused on a particular item. Just send me a message or a comment, and I'll get back to you within a week or so. And if you have a particular topic in mind that you want to be covered, please also let me know, and please like and subscribe. Thank you. Hope you have learned something from this.